Lesson 15, Svadhistana Chakra. Sva means self. Svadhisthana means the seat of the self. The reason why this chakra is called such is because within Svadhisthana chakra lies the possibility of the self awakening. Now there are two awakenings of the self. One is between the ages of 8 and 14. Remember, chakras have a developmental stage of approximately 7 years. This is the second chakra from the bottom, Muladhara chakra. Muladhara chakra's developmental stage is approximately between birth and the age of 7. Between the age of 8 and 14, we develop self-consciousness. Children develop not only self-consciousness related to themselves, but also in relation to the opposite sex, or the sex that you feel attracted to. If you go back in time, you will realize also, indeed, that you do not have much recollection, much memory of the first stage, the first 7 years of life. Most children have no memory of the first 7 years of life. Memory starts in that second developmental stage. If there is memory, there is always some. For most, it is something that deeply affected you. It can be a very positive experience, but very often it is a traumatic experience, a painful experience. For the rest, the past is, the first 7 years are for most people a blur. Just there's no memory there. It is the time that children spend time in front of the mirror, and they start looking at the details of themselves, the shape of their face, the color of their hair. They become concerned with their image. That is the developmental stage of Svadhisthana chakra. The second awakening of the self is a stage that not everybody goes through. Yoga is one of the practices that leads to that second awakening. That is where you deeply connect with the self with a capital S. So it's not superficial anymore or purely physical like in the first awakening, but is much more existential or essential recognizing of who we deep in our heart are. It is also the explanation of why people who take up a practice like yoga or any other practice that leads to the same kind of development, they change, they transform, as we call it. Let's have a look at the details. The subtle element of this chakra is water. The subtle vehicle of action is reproduction. The subtle organ of perception is taste, with the tongue, taste. The subtle energy is called samana prana. The color associated with this chakra is orange, and the mantra is Vam. I don't know if I mentioned last week about the color red. The color red is the color associated with Muladhara chakra. Where do you see the color red? Where do you see the color red? Red light district. People visit Amsterdam, everybody goes to the red light district. It's related to sex. Not romantic sex, but purely instinctive sex. And not only that, the marketing industry cleverly uses color to manipulate us. The most successful brands use red, even if they sell trash. Marlboro, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, all red. We are normally not aware how color affects us. But subconsciously it has a huge influence, and the marketing industry knows that. When you want to appeal to people's sense of trust, they use the color. Which color? What color do banks and insurance companies use?
Green.
Green and blue. Heart chakra and the throat. There's no coincidence there. That's marketing strategy. A bank that uses red, better avoid it. Instinctively you will pass by that bank. So the color, although we are not aware of it, it does have quite an impact in decision making. And I'm telling you this to bring your attention to being selective when you go shopping, for example. You feel attracted to products, whether that is fashion or kitchen utensils, or there's often color that will determine whether you will enjoy the product or not. So pay attention to that. For me, this color blue is very, it's the color of the throat chakra. The throat chakra is about emotion, stability, creativity. And it is a color that, frankly, most people feel a connection with. I was once looking for a winter coat. That was before the online shopping became big. So I went to the shopping mall in Yongsan, and I just couldn't find anything that appealed. And I know from experience that if I can't find anything, I better not come home with just something just because I needed it. I will just postpone it and come home empty-handed. And I've been going through that huge shopping mall, and I was about to go home, and I was going to take the escalator down, and at the first step of the escalator, a little dot of this color blue caught my eye all the way in the far corner of that floor. And I said, wait, have to check it out. And I went home with that coat. Blue. And I've enjoyed wearing that coat for, I don't know, 7 years, 8 years, before it was completely worn out and I had to throw it away. Pay attention to color. Really, it's very underestimated tool in how we select things in life. That is why each of the chakras are related to colors, and it also tells you something about how you are functioning. Really, there is therapy that is based on the use of colors. I don't know exactly how that works, but based on what we know about the chakras, it makes total sense. You can use music, sound, vibration, which is the mantra at the bottom. You can also use color for that. Svadhistana chakra is responsible for the functioning of the lower desires, like jealousy, greed, and desire, but it is also related to a sense of saving and collecting things. That is why children in that age period, that developmental stage, develop hobbies. Hobbies that often entail collecting things. Like when I was a child and electronics were barely existent other than a transistor radio, you collected stamps or just practical things. And the things that you collect have a very great value, although not in a material sense, but more in the way that you are attached to it. Also, social-mindedness, playing, and creativity. Now, social-mindedness, that is related to the developmental stage. The children open up to the outside world and the opposite sex, so you start interacting. Playfulness, that is an interesting aspect. We have, since 2 weeks ago, we started doing the fire poses. We will discuss that chakra in the later session, because Manipura chakra is the fire center. This is the water center. What does water do with fire? It douses the fire, it cools the fire, and it literally does. When we are very serious, it's a fire problem. When we are tensed, stressed, full of ego, also ambition, is all a fire problem. Playfulness activates Svadhistana chakra. When Svadhisthana chakra is activated, which means that the energy is expanding and rising up, when you are tensed, the energy is contracting and going down. But when it expands and it rises up, it envelopes the chakra above and it helps to control the fire. So, playfulness is a characteristic of people who are sattvic in this chakra. If you're not sattvic and you're struggling with nervousness, with too strong ambition, ambition is not bad, but it can turn harmful when it is too strong. You can control the behavior that comes with it when you're stressed, when you're, functioning based on ego and driven by strong ambition, by becoming playful. Start joking, start fooling around, be silly. It's a very, very powerful tool to control the fire. The function of humor, the function of comedy is exactly that. It allows us to put things into perspective, to watch Mr. Bean. Silly as it may sound, it is a very powerful tool. Of course, asana, daily practice of asana is a very helpful tool to not only for this chakra, but for all the lower chakras in particular, because they're all related to the physical body. When there is sattva in the chakra, it manifests as the taste. So people who are very sensitive to taste, they have lots of energy in that chakra. In Rajas, the vehicle of motion is reproduction. People who have trouble with reproduction, both men and women, they have an issue in the water center. In the first years of me teaching yoga in Korea, I had prenatal classes, and there were also women who came to me who were struggling to get pregnant. They were receiving IVF treatment and still failed to get pregnant. And they had heard about yoga and the possibility that it actually might help. So before starting class with them, I would explain how it works. Now, the reason why having trouble getting pregnant is typically a modern age problem. Why? In the past, we didn't have birth control, and we just got pregnant just as a natural consequence of having sex. Now we have birth control, and that allows us to plan. So we plan. We first want to pursue our career more, or we want to enjoy our relationship for a couple of years before we start with children. Or there are many reasons, but we now have the tool with which that allows us to plan family. Then when we decide to have a baby, it's not getting pregnant like in the past, just by accident. It's planned. We are mentally so occupied with the fact that we want to become pregnant. We are intimate with each other with the idea, I have to get pregnant. And it is exactly because of that, the tension that comes with wanting something, the desire, that keeps us from getting pregnant. There is a contraction of energy, and that contraction tells the body, you're not in the right condition to get pregnant this time around. So I would always have a conversation before starting class and tell them how this works and say, listen, if you want to get pregnant, stop wanting to get pregnant. Do not be intimate with your partner for the sake of getting pregnant. Just be intimate whenever you want to, not because you have to. That in the first place. And second, just enjoy it like you did before you wanted to have a baby. And you know what? Within 6 months, the women that came to do yoga with the goal to get pregnant, they all got pregnant. No exception. It's all about energy. And in this case, it's related to Svadhistana chakra, the water center. Reproduction is the function of this chakra. People who are relatively sattvic in this chakra, they show graceful and smooth movement and emotional maturity, flexibility and ability to accommodate changes. The Rajas characteristics are easily addicted, very emotional, difficulty with social skills, fear of change and lack of passion. No, I'm mixing it up. Easily addicted, very emotional, emotionally dependent and attached. Do you recognize these characteristics? The characteristics of artists. Rajas in this chakra, easily addicted, emotionally unstable. I think we talked about the characteristics of artists before because it is important to see how that works. Because very often, although we may not be artists, we are dealing with the same kind of issues. And when you understand how it works, you understand that it is not necessarily a bad thing, because it's all about energy, and the more energy you have, the better. But the more energy you have, the bigger the potential for instability. And then you need a tool to canalize that energy instead of oppressing it. The tamas characteristics, you will also recognize, it's a condition that most people are in. Rigidity in body and attitude, difficulty with social skills, fear of change and lack of passion. Many people, when growing up into adulthood, they lose their colorful feathers. They lose their beautiful song. While we are students, as children, we are full of joy, silliness, laughter. As teenagers, we are spontaneous, naive, innocent. full of playfulness. But the moment that we graduate, we become serious because we are told to. It's time to get a job. Done with all the school vacations, which you only then realize were so valuable. Once you start a career, you never have so many holidays that you had vacation that you had when you were in school. So done with hanging out and it's time to start a career, buy a house, start a family. So we become serious. And our energy with that drops like a concrete block. Literally. The reason why children and teenagers are so full of life is because their energy is here. And the reason why adults are so gray and serious and have lost their beautiful, colorful feathers and their beautiful song is because the energy drops, and it is because a change of attitude. If we understand that, we can still focus on the things that are important while maintaining that valuable energy. Look around and you will see most people do not possess that energy anymore, especially in environments in big cities. Amsterdam, London, Paris, Seoul, New York. So many grumpy faces everywhere. It's energy. And even while living in a big city, you do not have to allow yourself to be brought down, literally brought down, because it's your energy that drops, that leads to that change in how you express yourself and how you experience daily life. For most people, life is colorless and lifeless and joyless, and it's just about going through the motions, looking at the clock. It's time for lunch, it's time to go home, it's time to get up, it's time to go to work. And I've never been able to function in that way. And when I tried, it would just make me deeply unhappy. But most people adapt and settle. And it leads us into what I call a dark hole. You see at the bottom a quote from Carl Jung, who makes this connection. And I really like that. Oppressing emotions leads to imbalance in this chakra. Many people, after graduating, are being told to be serious. Stop fooling around. Stop being like a child, they will say. So we put a negative label on this wonderful energy. People who are emotional also are being considered unstable. I've helped young students of my yoga course to deal with that negative label that is put on them by their parents, their own parents, and also by teachers and other people in society that do not recognize that emotion is energy. And it is true, emotion can make us unstable. We need our parents and teachers to help us canalize that energy, because then we can start using it in a positive way, in a constructive way. But what happens when we are being labeled emotionally unstable, we think that we are crazy or something. We start to oppress, stop expressing our emotions. And it kills something wonderful inside us. Energy is our most precious asset. Emotion is energy. When we start oppressing it, we kill our most precious asset. And that is what Carl Jung meant when he said, emotion is the chief source of all becoming conscious. He makes the link with consciousness here. We do that too. Without energy and energy rising up, there is no awakening of consciousness. Carl Jung understood that. Emotion is the chief source of all becoming conscious. There can be no transforming of darkness, which is ignorance, into light, and apathy into movement without emotion. This is such a powerful quote from Carl Jung. If you do not allow yourself emotions, growth comes to an almost standstill. And that is what I see with the people that I left behind 26 years ago when I came from Amsterdam to Seoul. When I see people 26 years later, they have just gotten older physically, but they have barely evolved, they have barely grown. They have consolidated and stayed put, which for many people is comfortable. But when you are in the possession of large amounts of energy and you do not kill that, you cannot settle for such grayness and dullness. Your joy is your engine to fuel your consciousness. That is why the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu are jumping and dancing and giggling like little children. It's all energy. A person who claims to be a spiritual leader, who is very serious and tense and dark, is not really a spiritual leader, because their energy is low. It is this reason that I mentioned the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu a couple of weeks ago, exactly because of this. Compare them with other people their age, and the majority of people their age, their picture is just so totally the opposite. There is no energy to speak of. There's no sparkle. There's no joy anymore. About vegetarianism, vegetarianism is mentioned here for the first time. We should have talked about it when we talked about non-violence, actually. I often skip that and come back to it later. There are various reasons for vegetarian diet to be good for us. Here you see that it is recommended because vegetables, non-animal products, their contents are harmonious in itself. Sattvic juices are contained in vegetables. Meat is rajas. Then they make distinction between beef and pork compared with fowl, chicken and turkey and those things, and fish. But in the end, all meat is rajas, because most animals that die because they have to serve as food for us, they're being killed. And before they die, they're in huge distress, which fills their body with adrenaline, and you eat that. And that is the reason why meat can lead to restlessness, especially for meditators. That is a point. But the real reason why vegetarianism is recommended in a practice like yoga is not because of dietary considerations, but it is because of non-violence. We live in a time that you go to the supermarket and you buy a chicken breast or a steak, and you don't need to kill an animal yourself. I know for a fact that if I was born before the supermarkets, before butchers, shops that do the killing for you, if I would have to kill my own cow, pig, chicken, whatever, to feed myself, I wouldn't. I would just naturally be a vegetarian, because I can't even kill a spider or a fly. If they're in my house, I catch them and I throw them out. I keep them, I don't squash them, I carefully pick them up and let them continue to do their thing. For me, they are beings that are on a mission, just like we are on a mission. They have families and what have you, and they have just as much a right to life as we do. So I would never be able, and this is the point of vegetarianism being recommended in yoga, is maybe for a small part, it's about dietary considerations. It's mainly because we become complicit in killing another being. We violate the principle of ahimsa, non-violence. And it is a tricky time that we live in, because the killing now happens behind walls. We're not even aware of the suffering that goes into all those neatly packed pieces of meat that we find in the supermarket. I have been a vegetarian for many years, 20 years at least. But since I'm not really dedicated to spending many hours in the kitchen to cook, I kind of became undernourished. Several times it happened that I lost a lot of weight very suddenly, that my body just started consuming my muscle tissue. And that's very scary. You get heart palpitations, headaches. In the beginning you don't understand. You go to the clinic and you just find out that you're totally undernourished. The first time that happened, I went to a clinic. I had a comprehensive blood test done. So they check all the nutrients that your blood is supposed to contain, and all the markers were negative. Everything was lacking. And then I started selectively eating meat again, and I've never felt better. I feel really bad about that, kind of. I'm very conscious of what I'm doing. And I have 2 dogs also, that I feed them. You can't feed dogs broccoli and carrots and onions. They can't. They sniff at it and they turn away, like, what the hell is this? I feel bad about that, but that's just the reality I have to deal with if I want them to be healthy. So don't be fanatic. I have been fanatic. I have been a fanatic vegetarian. It has harmed me. I love cooking, but I don't love cooking in like hours and hours. And if you really want to put together very nutritious vegetarian meal, you can have everything you need in vegetarian meals, but vegetarian meals require lots of ingredients, lots of thingies that you need to prepare and put in, and I like cooking, but not in that way, not in such a elaborate, comprehensive way. Just not my thing. So I had to make a compromise there. Be sensible where it comes to your ideologies. Fanaticism it leads to the opposite of what we try to achieve, which is freeing of energy. Fanaticism leads to a contraction of energy, a tension that we can just avoid by loosening up. Questions about Svadhistana chakra? Okay. The element of the awakening of self-consciousness, it sounds complicated or far-fetched, but it's something that happens in my experience from the very beginning that you start doing something like yoga. Yoga is a very powerful tool to accomplish that, but there are probably some other forms of spiritual practice, maybe Tai Chi or Korea has several of these kind of spiritual practices that are also designed to let energy rise. It's a very natural process and it starts almost immediately at the beginning. All right, let's have a short break.